Shraddhavan, you're one of the early Aurovillians. You've been there for a long, long time. There are quite a few like you, but you're one of the most mysterious ones. Very, very little is known about you. There's not much that is known about Shraddhavan. Shraddhavan.
Can it be true?
Yes, it is, People do not know you so well in Auroville. They know about you, but we don't know much about you. Where you come from, how did you come here, where did you meet the mother first? So how did you arrive here?
Yes, I'm born in England, and I followed studies in English language and literature. I come from a family of teachers, but I never wanted to be a teacher. I studied librarianship. But also before coming to Auroville, I did quite a lot of travel. I had been in India twice before coming here.
You were interested in spirituality already?
No. I had come from a religious background.
Protestant?
My father was a Protestant pastor. And somehow in my late teens, I'd come to the conclusion that I couldn't live up to that Christian way of life. I'd become a rationalist, a materialist, and an anarchist. I was active at university I helped to organize the first national anarchist conference in UK since 1895 when Kropotkin was there. So that's amusing. And then traveling. Actually, we can say more or less overland via India to Australia and back again.
Alone?
No, with a partner.
How old were you then?
I was in my 20s. And in the summer of 1968, we were in Morocco, southern Morocco, and I suddenly felt I do not need to know what is over the horizon. It's not worth all the trouble of getting there. It's time for me to settle down. But then it became a very difficult time also in the relationship, and the winter of 68, 69, it was a kind of nadir of my life. I didn't know where to go or what to do. I remember consulting the I Ching, and the I Ching said it would be advisable to meet a great man. And I said it only increased my despair because I felt there are no great men anymore. It was a real painful feeling that where can one turn? I thought I'd read everything that would help me and studied everything that would help me. And about 3 weeks after that, I have told this story many times. It must be recorded at the archives also. One Sunday afternoon, my partner and we went to visit a friend. And we were very surprised when we reached the flat to find it packed with people.
London?
In London, in the Earl's Court, basement flat in Earl's Court. There were, I don't know, maybe almost 30 people there. They were listening to a talk. There were 2 gentlemen up front, and one man with a very strong German accent was talking. We'd missed the beginning of the talk, so I didn't know who or what he was talking about. But in the space of about half an hour, 3/4 of an hour, it was as if all the things that I was concerned about and all my interests and lines of exploration, I experienced them like separate rooms in my head. And somehow all the doors opened and everything got connected, and I could see the way forward for the rest of my life. So at the end of the talk, I rushed up to him and said, "Who is that? Who you are talking about?" Sri Aurobindo. Never heard of him. Couldn't believe it.
Who was the German man?
His name is Jobst Mühling. He was here in the ashram in the 50s. He came here because of meeting Purani in East Africa. And he was in London because he had prepared a big compilation from all the published sources available at that time, Sri Aurobindo and Mother, on the psychology of Sri Aurobindo's yoga.
Wow.
And after that he came to that flat 2 or 3 evenings a week and read out of his compilation.
Still exists, this compilation?
Yeah, I don't think he ever got it published, and of course now it must be superseded because many, many more materials have become available. But 15 or 20 young people were gathered there. Many of them fell asleep during the reading. He said that doesn't matter, they're absorbing it subconsciously. But I didn't fall asleep, I was
You had the
absent.
answers to your question by hearing what Sri Aurobindo said.
It was like that. But it was more than that. It was like these are not questions anymore, these are directions, and he's shown the way to follow it. I mean, first it was just a very intense interest. And Jobst became like a kind of guide and teacher for that group of people, and he lent me little books, Nolini Kantagupta, Yoga of Sri Aurobindo, some things by Madhav Pandit, Practical Guide to Integral Yoga. And I used to read as I was going to and from work on the tube. I was working in central London at the Library Association. And I had a very nice place where I could sit quietly in the lunch hour. There was a conference room where nobody ever went. I used to sit there and read. And
You were a lonely person? Or were you
no, I was a very, very sociable person. Still am.
Right.
And one day on the tube on the way home, I remember I was reading from Bases of Yoga, and there was a letter there. Even now I can't speak of it without emotion.
Please do.
When I read that letter, I said, that's what I was born for.
What did that letter say?
It said that really what we surrender means, it means to find out the divine's will and do that instead of following any other kind of will. And I thought, yes, that's what I've always been trying to do, whatever it is. So I didn't go home, I went straight to Jobst and I told him that I read this and this is my experience, now I know why I'm here. And
He took you seriously? He took you seriously?
he took me very seriously. He said,
Was he the only one who took you seriously?
well, I didn't share it with anybody else at that time. Later, first I went to Jobst and he told me, if it's like that, you take the synthesis of yoga and you make it your Bible. And in those days we couldn't buy Sri Aurobindo's books in London. In order to get a copy of the synthesis of yoga, we had to write to Carlo Schuller in Zurich. And when he sent the book, he sent a photograph of Mother. I think now it is a photograph of 67. And he sent the first information about Auroville. Carlo Schuller from Zurich. He was the distributor in Europe at that time for Sri Aurobindo's books. So Jobst was suddenly very interested. What is Mother doing there? No. And of course my friends and my partner, they were all, accepting Jobst somehow as a guide.
He's died now? Has he died?
I think he's still alive, but he hasn't been connected with Auroville for many, many years. He lives with Karl-Heinz Stockhausen in Cologne or Frankfurt or somehow. I believe he's still living. He has published a little book in German, Integrale Yoga.
We decided to come to India already then.
Well, you see, we had been looking. One of the bad things about that winter was being stuck in England. We had left England in 1963. We didn't want to live in England. It was an accident that we were there. And to suddenly realize that we are here and we are stuck and this is not where we want to be and we're never going to be able to save up enough money to leave again, it was very difficult. No? We'd been very happy in Australia. We'd realized in our travels that if we were going to settle somewhere, it had to be somewhere where somehow English is spoken. It would have been too difficult for us to live in Israel or in Turkey or, you know. I mean, I'm just giving the parameters at that time. So a new city, a new experiment in India, that was very, very attractive to my partner, to my husband. By that time we were married. I didn't feel like that. I'd reached this conclusion that I'd done enough traveling, and I'd got Sri Aurobindo. I didn't see any need to go anywhere. I thought, this is the path. I can live this path anywhere.
It's the right thing.
But the time came for Jobs to leave London. And before he left, he told me, I think I will be going to Auroville. And when I'm there, I will have a definite work to do. And I think you could help me in that work. That moved me very much. I was very moved by that. But by that time, I had started having some inner contact with Mother. I saw her in several dreams, and there was the feeling that after all, it was to follow the Divine's will. So it wasn't until, I think, October 1970, this group of friends, we went driving out in the country. On the way home, we passed through a small English country town, and there was a festival of India going on. Indian music, Indian smells, incense, and handicrafts on sale, and things like that. And we went inside and spent a pleasant, hour or half hour or something. And when we came out, our friends, they said, it's really time, it's time, we have to go to India now. And they all started making preparations for a big overland trip. And I still hadn't had any inner indication about it that I should go, so I was kind of hanging back. And then suddenly a postcard arrived from Jobst, from the airport. I'm leaving for Auroville. Hope to see you there. And then that was it. So I told them, I said, if I'm going to Auroville, to Pondicherry and to Auroville, I really don't need to do that overland trip again. I've done enough times. I don't need to see all that and go through all that again. So very kindly they arranged a plane ticket for me.
So you mean they paid for the plane ticket?
They organized that for me. And our Jürgen, our library Jürgen, took me to the airport and put me on the plane. He came actually, I think he came in 1971 with a small group of our friends from Munich. But then there were difficulties and they had to leave, and then he came back much later.
You flew from London?
I flew, I think, from Brussels. I flew from Brussels to Mumbai on a turboprop airplane. It was overbooked, so another English lady and they decided they would put us in first class, which was actually just 2 seats sort of behind the pilot. He came out and chatted to us. And I don't know how many times we stopped on the way before we finally reached Mumbai. And then I felt confident. I'm in India, I'm safe, I can travel by train by myself to... Yes, we had been in India twice, and I felt perfectly safe that I can travel by myself to Chennai. And in Chennai, now I'm mixing up the times that I came. I think in Chennai I just... I wanted to get a train. I didn't know about buses in India. So I had to get on a train to Villupuram. And when you arrived in those days, then Villupuram bus to Pondi, of course. Yeah. And when you arrived in the bus station, there were people with rickshaws. They see a foreigner, they're very ready to take you to the ashram.
Right. No? So that was November...
That was November 12th, 1970.
That's actually 39 years.
Yes. And I was looking for Jobst. The rickshaw driver knew enough to take me to the Bureau Central, which then was where the bakery is now.
Right.
And I asked there about Jobst, and they said, we don't know anything, but MP Pandit will know, Madhavji will know. So I was taken into the ashram, into the courtyard, to his room there. And he received me very, very graciously. You have to imagine, I was a hippie in those days. I had my hair down to here, I had a miniskirt up above my knees. I think I must have been all in black, I don't know. But he didn't take any notice of any of that. Jobst, he said, oh yes, I think Jobst is in Auroville. You can't go to Auroville, you have to get permission to go to Auroville. Mother has to give permission. But just over here is the Auroville office, where Purna Prema now lives. Yeah? Lived, yes, lived. And he told me to meet Shushila, and I met Shushila, and he said, but you can stay with us. He arranged for me to stay in Park Guest House.
There was a warmth.
Extremely warm welcome.
Because some people didn't have the same.
Yes, they didn't have that experience.
You met Shushila?
I met Shushila, she took care of me. Oh, you are staying at Park Guest House? Yes, we'll send a message to Jobst. And,
how many days you stay in the ashram?
1 week.
1 week. And then you moved to Auroville? Yeah,
that's also a story. Because in those days, well, Jobst came and met me, no? And in those days we had to fill in an application form. Actually, we'd already written to Mother. I missed out this part of the story, that we'd written and sent photographs, and in principle she had accepted us for Auroville. But anyway, when we arrived we had to fill in a form and a photograph. I had a little photograph taken on Nehru Street somewhere, and it was really a very nice photograph. I came across it again the other day. That man took a beautiful photograph. It went to Mother. And those forms, once filled in, there were 3 people you could give them to. One was Monsieur André, one was Nava, and the other was Roger. And Jobst said, let's take it to Roger.
You met Roger?
So he took me to Roger's huge architect's office. He hadn't built his house at that time. They were in what used to be the State Bank building, a beautiful big building, and the whole first floor there was the L'Avenir d'Auroville. And in my form I mentioned As I told you, I never wanted to be a teacher, but I had done some teaching and I had done work with children. And when he saw that, he immediately got very excited and said, "Oh, Mother's pressing us that we have to start a school in Auroville. You can do that," he said. And I felt very clearly that I couldn't possibly do that. But anyway, because he was so keen, he took me to see Mother at his time. He used to see her every morning at 9 o'clock, I believe. I think it must have been 9 o'clock. So on Friday, I think it's a Friday, 19th of November, I was to wait for him, downstairs at the bottom of the stairs. And I felt, well, starting a school and all that, it's beyond me, but when I see Mother, I will tell her everything. I will tell her my whole story, and she will know what's right for me.
You had any expectations of what would be that meeting?
No, I didn't care. I thought she would know. Yes, of course, I thought I would be able to talk to her. But then as we were going up the stairs, he said to me, "We don't speak." And I didn't know that I was supposed to take flowers. At the last minute, somebody sent me running over to the flower room, and I got a very bedraggled little bouquet. I was ashamed of it, but anyway.
You waited on the terrace?
We waited on, it was pouring with rain. Perhaps, I don't know whether the terrace was must have been, but anyway, we waited on the stairs, the inside stairs. And I had to sit there and wait, and he went in, and after some time they called my name. Maggie. In those days I was Maggie. So then I came into Mother's room. It was pouring with rain. It was November. The current must have been off. I remember that room very shadowy. I didn't see anybody in it except Mother. You come in through the door and she's sitting. And for me, the whole thing in my memory, it plays as if it was underwater, kind of greenish, bluish underwater scene, and she was wearing some kind of greenish, bluish dress also. So I thought, well, I'm not allowed to talk to her, but just let her look. I tried to be as open as possible. And after some time she gave me a rose, and then I understood now it's time to go. And I can't say I had any foudroyant experience. But then, as I was going down the stairs, I just didn't know why I was there or where I was even, and they had to come running after me, and Roger had to come running after me to say, "Mother says yes." And that was a very special moment with Roger.
Oh yes, that's interesting.
Complete bonding with, I don't know, I suppose both of us, we'd just been with Mother. Psychic being in front.
You're British and French and...
Yeah, we're just Mother's children. No. It happened to me once with somebody else in the same way.
Did you feel the same thing?
This I don't know. How to know?
That connection within you...
The connection was always there, to the end, yeah.
So the moment he said, Mother said yes,
Then Jobst was waiting downstairs. He took me to Monsieur André, because Monsieur André was in charge of accommodation. And Monsieur André said, well, they're sleeping 3 to a hut in Aspiration. There's no room at all. But Jobst said she'll stay with me, and so he gave me a little card, and we went back over to the Auroville office, and we met Henry Bell, who was in charge of transport.
Right.
And he said, well, I don't know, it's pouring with rain, but if they can make it down the canyon, they'll be here at 11 o'clock. And you can go.
luggage?
I must have had some luggage. Not much. I must have had. I don't remember that bit at all. So they came, Jean-Claude driving a little white van.
Our caravan van.
Yes. And we arrived in Aspiration at the cafeteria just at lunchtime. Navodit came out to welcome us. He was the secretary of the community at that time.
British also. Yeah.
British, yes. And he told me, yes, they phoned and you are number so-and-so. I think it was number 54, something like that. Lunch.
You settled in Aspiration first.
I was in Aspiration for 6 years. Yes. Because of the school. I didn't have to start the school because... well, they were part of it also. But at the time when I arrived, there was Rod and a lady called Ursula Flug, German lady. They were holding classes for the children of Aspiration, and some kids who came from, like Tandapani, from Forecomers and so on. And most of the Auroville children were attending, going to Pondi, going to the Equals One school. But anyway, things were moving. Kirit was involved, Norman Dowsett was put in charge. I think he was Monsieur André's choice. That he seems to be a good organizer, put him in charge of the school. And Vincenzo and Jean-Claude and all those people worked very hard to put up a Keat hut, which stood where the press is now.
A good time for you, Aspiration, the 6 years in Aspiration, a good time?
I mean, that was a very, very special time. No? Very, very special time.
You met the mother also for talking about school and the children?
I didn't meet her to speak to, ever. But I got to see her several times. As teachers, we went as a group, I think in 1970 when we started, and then 71 it happened again, 72 probably again. And I was looking after the first boarding. There were a few children living with us. Ange was the very first one.
She came from Equals One, wasn't she?
I think she'd been in the ashram school and they couldn't cope with her. Then she must have been at Equals One. Then Auroville got her. And it was...
She was a difficult child then.
She was, of course, a very, very special child. Mother was seeing her every week, you know. She had all the wonderful qualities and she had also just the opposite. And if I skip a bit to the time when Aspiration School closed down, some of the children did, against all rules and regulations, they did get accepted back into ashram school. And Ange was one of them. And then suddenly, in the midst of that difficult time, Auroville's reputation rose because of the way that Ange had developed. They were very, very happy with her. And I always felt, you know, when she becomes 15, 16, when she's in control of her impulses and all that, she'll be a wonderful young woman. And that's what she's become, of course. Yes.
Who else was there in the school? Which other
Taddy, Hero, Renu, Tandapani, a boy from Kulapalayam village called Arumugam, quite a tragic story. He was kind of adopted by the Aspiration community. I think Gerard Marichal took him up and he wrote to Mother about him and she said, all right, you try. In the 80s he committed suicide. One of the casualties of our civil war. Yes. And
how did you develop?
wait a minute, I had more children. Piero's 2 children. No, Piero's elder daughter at that time, Marta. Marta.
Wonderful child also.
Yes, very special. And there were about 35 children on the first day, and many of them weren't living in Auroville. There were quite a lot of families who'd been accepted for Auroville who were still living in Pondicherry because there was nowhere for them to live. So on that first day, the really difficult thing was communication. These 35 children spoke probably 15 different languages, and teachers, we also had quite an array, but different array. Christoph was with us, Savitra, Rod, Anand came a little later.
A good teacher, you're a good
And of course Alain, was very much in the school. He and Gérard especially concentrated on modern mathematics. They were passionate about that. Kindergarten also got started up after a couple of months. The first kitchen got started. To start with, the children were having their meals in the cafeteria, and it was felt that this was not a very suitable atmosphere for our school children, and something else should be found. And the first kitchen was built where now the bakery is. A beautiful peat structure. I think Johnny put it up. The foundations are there. Yeah. So I think very beginning of January we started there.
71.
Yes, 71. And that became eventually the community kitchen, and towards the end of 73 or beginning of 74.
Croquette was there. Wasn't Croquette there?
Croquette came, I think, a little later. Jean and Gordon joined us during the first year.
A lot of interesting people.
Yes, there was a French lady called Lydie. She was here with her husband Robert, and they had 2 teenage children. Robert was a dentist. I think he worked in the school a bit also. And his children also came and studied in the school.
You lived there one day too.
You will remember these people. Jocelyn Elder came with Tanya and Sasha. There was a wonderful man called, I had his name in my mind just now, it's gone. 2 children, Kamala and Nathan. He'd hitchhiked with them from Ibiza. Mitch.
Yeah, played the guitar.
Wonderful man. Yeah.
Disappeared also.
Went back to California, I think. So like that. A very motley crew. And it was really chaotic the first year. And it was only in April 71 that Shanti came. After she came, things began to fall into place. And the thing about Shanti was, I've heard this story. I don't know whether it's exactly true, but she contacted Yvonne and worked at E=1 first. So Yvonne took her to meet Mother, and Mother said, "This is the teacher I've been waiting for." So the relation was that Shanti could meet Mother, ask any question, any time. And she also had the complete trust of the whole administration.
And the teacher.
And gradually among the teachers, she was such an amazing organizer. I was just Jean and Gordon are here just now, and I was remembering her. I said, she's my model, really, for organization.
She's going to the right kind of person.
Yes, yeah. But the way that she could allow all these strange people to build up their own departments. First was the kindergarten, no? And then how she supported Alain and Eliane with the kitchen. They developed a special kitchen first for the kindergarten, but then it extended for the whole school. It became such an important part of the school, this French kitchen with French mœurs, no? So important. But that's all later. I mean, the first few months it was.
Shanti played a very important role.
She was the one who somehow pulled it all together and held it all together until November
She left in the
1976.
Why November 1976?
At that moment, there was a big change going on in Auroville. There was a feeling that Auroville has to be Auroville for the Aurovillians, organized by the Aurovillians. And we had the same holidays as ashram school. So in November there was a staff meeting. And at that meeting the decision was taken that those people who were coming from Pondi to teach, to work with the children, and those children who were coming from Pondi to the school, they would be asked to move to Auroville or leave the school. 4 decisions. I mean, that was first step in the harakiri. And the second one was that the school, at that time we were managing it, a group of 6 teachers. Alain, Anand, myself, Shanti, and Jean Pougot.
You had a harmonious relationship?
Yes. I mean, of course there were differences of opinion, but it was working. That the school would not be managed by this management group anymore, it would be managed by the Portus meeting.
You disagreed at that time?
Shanti and I, we both had a lot of misgivings. But I think in the end we agreed. I don't want to put the blame on anybody else.
That was one of my questions actually. If you look back, would you say that, say between 71 and 76, there were 2 different groups that evolved, say within your small world, which was the school, the teaching, were there a group which were more close to the ashram, more maybe spiritualized, and another group that had a different approach, maybe more French, more.
There may have been something like that, and certainly I've heard it said that there were 2 groups in aspiration.
Were there? You're there to say. You were there.
I can see that there were poles,
Right.
but I can't say that I ever felt that there were 2 distinct groups. That came later. I don't feel that this division came in later.
Well, it's a very important part of the history of Auroville. I think we should anyway touch it, and you're.
I mean, even we can say when we were embarked on this whole, what later became really a civil war between Auroville, I feel how strongly people still felt we want to do Mother's will. What would Mother want us to have done? No?
The majority felt like that,
yes.
including those who disagreed.
Yes. Yeah.
So that was good.
It was good. What became difficult was when Mother was no longer there, and Satprem became the accepted guide for what is Mother's will. And not all of us could accept that.
You had met Satprem before?
I never met Satprem.
Because you didn't want to?
No, just never happened. I met him once in the subtle physical, it wasn't very nice.
Okay. You're British and many of us are French. Is there also, within the British and the French, a different approach?
I remember, at the height of that difficult time in Aspiration, films used to be shown in near the tennis court there. Frederick had organized a big screen, Certitude, yes. And one of the films we saw was an anthropological film made by Margaret Mead, who's a Canadian anthropologist. And it was very interesting. She had taken families from 4 different countries: France, Japan, Canada, and India. And she had just filmed and observed how do they treat their children was very, very interesting because she considered that the way children are treated when they're small is formative of character and nature. Obviously it is, yes. So there are many interesting things about that film which I won't go into now, but at the end of the film she said, I want to ask, what in each of these cultures, what is the worst thing that a child can do? So in India and in Japan, the worst thing that a child can do is to disobey and be disrespectful to the elders. In America, in France, it's to tell a lie. And she said in Canada, for Canada, I never know whether they're British or they're American. In Britain, the worst thing a child can do is to be cruel, particularly to an animal or to somebody or something helpless. And in America, it's to steal. I could immediately see the positions that we had all taken. That
was in 76?
That must have been later. That must have been 78. You know?
The height of the trouble.
Yes, it was happening all around us. But I was still able to go to the films, so 78, not 79, not 80. So my own feeling was that we were hurting people. That was the thing that bothered me very much. The French were upset because they felt there was a lot of untruth around.
They had a point?
They were right, of course. And the Americans thought, yeah, property. What's all this? No? Money's being diverted. Lies are being told. No?
You knew about it. You had seen it. You were not blind to it.
I was not blind to it. And for the Indians, it was, these are our elders. These are the people Mother have put in charge.
That was traumatic.
What we can do.
Traumatic.
So all the battle lines were drawn. This was the split.
Today,
So I must say, if you ask me about my personal position,
yes, I do.
I always thought that we have to oppose falsehood. Auroville is something much larger. I mean, Nava in his way was a man of vision, but his vision wasn't large enough for Auroville. But still, I mean, he'd set the ball rolling in 64. I felt that whatever we do, it should be done in a way that's in accord with our yoga, with our path. And when I see it going into violence, in order to oppose untruth, you're also exaggerating so much that it becomes an untruth. You're setting up traps for those people. You are internal conflicts developed, which I felt were very unjust. I thought, this is not the way that Mother would want us to go. And gradually I tried to understand more and more what is happening, and I saw that somehow after Mother's passing, it's obvious that all the forces that didn't want Auroville to happen just poured into everybody who was even a tiny little bit open. All of us were open, all of us were beginners. And there was so much confusion even in the ashram, I mean, among the senior sadhaks who've been there for 40, 50 years. Nobody was really able to give any guidance, no? Only Satprem. Satprem was the only one who identified somehow with the Auroville point of view, so people felt, oh, he understands, and there's the agenda and all the rest of it. No, he's been so close to Mother, he's the one. So even he became a channel for division. He had something in him which allowed that to happen. And so I felt personally what I have to do is to resist that which wants to to divide. So it means that it doesn't matter how people behave and what they do, I still have to see that we are all one. And I felt it's like when a wound, you know, when there's a cut happens, then the two edges have to come together. There were so many forces trying to keep everything apart. And it's painful then, you know, any contact you have with the other side of the wound is painful. But still, it's all part of one body.
Is it still a wound today for you?
No. I'm absolutely amazed. I mean, of course, there are still some people who have problems with me.
Really?
But,
Raquel doesn't. Raquel hasn't.
No, Raquel hasn't. Raquel hasn't. Serge and Alain. I came to work so closely with them.
Before the event?
No, after.
After.
Claude, I remember there was a time when Claude and I, we were like this. We had to oppose each other so much. Claude Arpi. And the first time we had to work together, I know he was trembling and I was trembling too. No? But then he's such a person of such immense goodwill, you know. One can only see his tremendous goodwill for Auroville. So now it is not like that. No, now we really again we feel a close relationship.
Did it damage Auroville?
Definitely it has done. Definitely it has damaged. Definitely it has done.
Was it necessary that, you know, Auroville separates from the Shraddhavan society to evolve its own identity, but in the process did it do some damage?
You see, I suppose once Mother had left, all that split was inevitable. She said no to Satprem. If I have to leave now, the world will go through a terrible time. I don't know how it could have been avoided, actually. Because, of course, Sri Aurobindo Society, I mean, as long as she was there, Nava would do what she said. But if he felt responsible himself, and the minute she left, how could he collect money anymore? He had only a very few people then that he could draw on. And so him and his whole circle, Prabhaben, Kishori Lalji, they were running prosperity. They wanted to know how the money is being spent. They wanted to control that. And Shamsundar wasn't helping with that. Their split, actually the real split was between Shamsundar and Nava.
Were you closer to Shamsundar or closer to Nava?
Inwardly, I'm closer to Nava. In circumstances, I was much closer to Shamsundar. I was intimate with Shamsundar.
Actually, you and the group became closer to Shamsundar during the trouble. And then you...
He was involved in this formation of the Auroville Society. No? I was one of the 7 people. Frederick, Tuan, Rode.
The first
the Auroville Society.
Jocelyn.
Petit Jocelyn. I don't remember now. Yusuf, I think. Yusuf.
What happened to that Auroville society?
Oh, this is all in the archives, no?
But through your eyes, you know, we need to see through your eyes. It's also...
I joined because Frederick asked me. He said, we have to do something, and maybe it's better. I trusted him. But I must say, at the moment when he asked me, I didn't get the inner sanction. I was just flattered to be asked, and Frederick, and it sounded good.
You were in certitude then?
No, I was still in aspiration at that time. This is 1975, November 75. And the next day, probably the next day. I was with Kishore Lal and Prabha in their house, something to connect it with the school, and I was on very good terms, especially with Prabha Ben. I still am. I love her very, very much. And suddenly there are Tuan and Rude coming and announcing the formation of the Auroville Society. I mean, I didn't see any harm in it, really. Kishore Lal was just shattered, completely shattered. And only then I began to realize what had happened.
What had happened?
Now I'm seeing it all in hindsight. No?
Good.
That Frederick had never wanted Nava to be in charge of Auroville. And now Shamsunda had quarrelled with Nava after Nava's passing.
They all quarrelled. Uda quarrelled with
Yes.
Nava. They all
And so I think Kalya, some other people, Lisa, they'd been trying to find a way that not all Auroville funds have to pass through society. From business point of view, they wanted to do it, that they can do their development.
which was okay.
And out of that, there must have been several proposals on the table. Shamsunda gave them his proposal. That was his weapon against Nava. That was the Auroville Society. But I didn't know that at the time. But I do know that very early on in the process, I realized, and I said, look, Mother said anybody who starts a quarrel strikes a direct blow against the Divine's work. And that's what we've done. I said that to him.
To whom?
To Shamsunda.
So actually, he was more of a grudge against Nava. He was using all of it to.
I don't know whether it was like that. You know, everybody's got their ideal. He thought Matrimandir was so important. Nava was not interested in Matrimandir at all. Mother had chosen Shamsunda. I don't know who Nava's candidate had been. She put all her confidence for Auroville in Shamsunda. He was the go-between. And I think he had very good qualities for that, actually.
I think we have
He didn't impose his will. He
more
always
seriously.
listened and saw, and what do the people want, and what's the information that I've got that they haven't got, can I put it in? And then he somehow made things happen. And Nava came to the conclusion that he can't trust him. He came to the conclusion that Roger and Shamsunda are in a conspiracy against him. And there was an awful meeting, you may have been there, I don't know whether you were still, in June 1974. Vincenzo and people like that, they were noticing the split, which hadn't touched most of us. They were very, very concerned about it.
Between Shamsunda and Nava.
Yes. And Nava orchestrated a reconciliation ceremony. For me, it's the worst thing which has ever happened on Aurovillian soil, actually. It's my personal.
Yes, better.
A meeting was called under the banyan tree,
Matrimandir.
banyan tree. So this is going to be a gathering for the reconciliation of Nava and Shamsunda. That was announced before. So many people came. We came with an aspiration. And I sat there, and I mean, this is really my experience, Francois. This is the unity tree. The spirit of Auroville was in that tree. And Nava steps up in his way, his official way, and I'm calling upon Shamsunda to accept the hand of friendship from me. You know, really as if, yeah, he's the CEO, this is his show, this is his thing. And he doesn't even give Shamsunda a choice, you know, how could he say no? It was such an act of violence. It was really as if we had slapped her face and whoops, she went. And everybody was just struck dumb. I thought I should have stood up and said, Nava, you can't do this. If I'd had enough courage, I would have done it.
Nobody said anything.
Nobody said anything. We all went away without looking at each other. Pain in the heart, I mean, for me at least.
How many people were there?
50? I don't know how many people there were then.
A lot for this time.
So for me, everything, I mean, for me personally, everything starts from this moment, because I think it was something unforgivable from my standards. That you don't put somebody on public display like that and then not give him any choice, no, not give him the chance to say anything or anything. No. It's not done, it can't be done.
But the Aurovillians had a point, when they said that, Nava was not fit to, and the society was.
This I agree with. I agree with. But I think, I mean, from my point of view, the way that we went, I mean, maybe to found the Auroville Society, this was okay.
Right.
No. But a lot of other things happened after that.
Lots of people got hurt in this battle, no? I mean,
Yes.
even today we see
People died.
people die. Many of the leaders, even today, are not, in the best of health.
Mm.
Looking back, do you think it was totally unnecessary?
As I say, I think, how could it have been avoided? What we just have to be grateful that we've come through. What a grace! What a grace! I mean, in any other community, under any other circumstances, that would have been the end. We came through somehow by grace. And I feel that somehow our little group of neutrals, we have contributed something to that coming together and to what Auroville has become afterwards. Of course, government also has contributed. At the time we thought this is insane. Mother said she doesn't want the government at all circumstances, it shouldn't be the government. But actually the coming of the government brought a sense of security and stability. And the amazing thing was that all through that time, people still were joining. People were coming to Auroville, not only on the revolutionary side, also our side, we the outsiders, the neutral. Several people joined at that time and invested not only their energy but everything they had for Auroville.
Isn't there, at our level, in spirituality?
Yes, we've taken far too long on all this.
That was the important part. It's a very important. I don't think many people will be able to dwell upon this, history of Auroville like you do. So before the interview, I thought, of course, it's important. You meeting the mother, how you came here, but how you live this traumatic and very important. Part of Auroville is something that has to be recorded and has to be said.
And I have to say that personally, I learned lessons in my life I couldn't have learned in any other way.
Isn't there a clash at our level, between what we conceive as spiritual life, as the way of spirituality, and action, when action has to be a little... Isn't there a contradiction that was actually what you stumbled upon, and many of us do stumble upon?
Of course it's difficult. And I remember that there was a time, somehow at the beginning of that Auroville Society thing, or perhaps when I just first left it, when I first resigned, there was a period, maximum it was 3 weeks, when there was a real concrete inner guidance at every minute of the day. And it was like walking a razor's edge. You can't step even a little bit this way or a little bit that way. You have to just follow the guidance so precisely. And it was a strain and I couldn't keep it up. But it was a very special, to know that it can be like that. No?
The Auroville today that you see, are you at peace with it?
I'm grateful, Francois. Really, that Auroville still exists, that all the opportunities are open, that people still come and put in all their commitment and their goodwill. I'm not satisfied, None of us can possibly be satisfied because it's not the Auroville that Mother wanted. But we are not the Aurovillians that Mother wanted. Auroville can only be Auroville when there's enough true Aurovillians. So we can't blame anybody. Each of us has to become a true Aurovillian, and that's the only...
Of course you're true Auroville.
I can't say I've really fulfilled her conditions.
Right.
I try.
C'est fini quoi. Looking back, on all this, doing this work we do in Raqqa, people are not aware of, such an extraordinary life that they have, so much that they have given, done, This is why we do it also. Listen to you or Shama, You have given so much. We have given so much. These early settlers, difficult conditions, with faith only.
People now can't imagine what it was like. No, people are upset if the electricity is off for 24 hours.
It was an extraordinary time.
2 months in aspiration without water.
And you lived an extraordinary time. And of course, being a so-called neutral, you went through, difficult times.
Tough times. But everybody went through tough times. It wasn't only us. Everybody went through tough times. And I don't want to say we were right and they were wrong. It's not like that. We were all stupid human beings doing our best. So now we have the chance to do.
At Shrobino's level, he was able to be a yogi and then do action. I don't know if you read Peter Lee's book, about which there's so much controversy.
No, I haven't read it, but it's clear, He knew what he had to do. Even before he started having spiritual experiences, he knew what his mission was. He says from the age of 11, he knew somehow, and it became more and more clear. And then he got the spiritual experiences, and then he had a guidance. There was an inner voice which told him exactly what to do, and he was able to do it. And then you see Mother, she could harmonize all the contradictions. We are so small, each of us can only express imperfectly a fragment of something.
Have to do actions which are unspiritual.
Oh, yeah. I'm not against violence as such. In Essays on the Gita, he has clearly said it, But first you have to be sure it's the divine who's your charioteer.
But we can't be. That's the problem.
So that is our problem. So then we should be very careful, We shouldn't be following our vital impulses. And of course, I have to say, many people here thought that Supreme is the mouth of the divine.
But still, violence is a difficult spiritual path, whether you do it consciously or not. If one has to... look, reading Shrobino's life.
No, so when
people today they don't understand. Even these disciples don't understand how his brother could, make precious bomb in his. Shrobino could endorse, the killing of people.
When New Community was occupied.
Yes.
Solar eclipse day, 1981 or 82, I guess it was. 81 it must have been. We had to do something.
Yes.
And I called the society. I called the watchman. First I called Shamsundar, and then he said, you can call Indra. We called the police, of course. Indra called the police. We had to do something. But finally it was we ourselves who had to move in there and start taking people out. And 5 minutes later they were all out. We moved them out. There was some force helping us. And they stayed outside. They surrounded the house. The police didn't come till the afternoon. And at midday, or after midday, things were very, very quiet. And I made a prayer to Mother that, I have to get rid of these people and I have no idea how to do it. And just a couple of minutes later, there was Frederick leading everybody back into the house, up the stairs, and I just put my hand out like that. And I said, Frederick, where are you going? He said, we want to talk to Joss. I said, you can't talk to Joss inside. Joss will come out and talk to you outside.
New community? What? I don't remember.
New community. It's a big house in Certitude, which was Ellen is living there. Yeah, but at that time it was the headquarters of the Neutrals.
Yeah. So you were not living in
I was not living there that time. I was living next door in Frederick's storeroom. Thomas was with Thomas.
Right.
Hmm?
And the morning the French, I wanted to...
Bernard and Claude turned up on their big horses, and there's a whole story. But anyway, they occupied the house. And it wasn't the first house that had been occupied. But I wasn't...
Were you there?
I really felt that this is not possible, this is not allowed.
What year?
New community.
This must have been 82, 81. 82 was the real nadir. This was 81. We can check it because there was a full solar eclipse that day. And that was the reason when I said you can talk to Joss outside, somebody at the back said, yes, yes, outside, outside. They all wanted to look at the solar eclipse. And they all just turned and went. But for me, this was Mother's intervention. No? And then 10 minutes later, the police arrived and everything was settled down. And we were able to remain in New Community until, until today. We never had to leave it.
Still today is hurt and by some of the ostracism that he experienced in those years, he told me.
Yes. Anyway, that's his problem.
But you don't.
No, I don't.
Today you meet Gérard.
Yes.
Okay.
Quand Gérard est revenu, je lui ai embrassé. Oui, j'étais très contente de le voir. Oui.
Shankar? Shankar?
Shankar n'est jamais revenu.
Non.
Non.
Mais si tu le rencontres aujourd'hui?
Je sais pas. Je sais pas. Oh, Paul, for instance, Paul Vincent, Hervé, these people still have difficulties with me.
But they were not the leaders.
No.
They were the second leader.
But still, they identified themselves. Yeah. And of course, I left Auroville in '82, and I didn't know whether I was going to come back. I went back with my mother, and I spent some time in Germany. And while I was there, I had to decide, am I coming back or not?
You had bitterness in you then? Did you have bitterness in you then? Or suffering?
It was all too much for me. Just too much. You know, you screw up your courage and you do certain things, and then it becomes too much. You don't know how to have the courage to face it anymore.
You're a strong person. I mean, you also went to all the way to what you felt was right, like the French did. You were committed, so in a way.
But I had to stand alone. I was not a big group. Anyway, I lost the thread there, but anyway. Oh yes, am I coming back? I didn't know. We'd already started Grace. Helmut and Peter were living in Grace, but it was under siege, of course. And I thought, suppose I win the lottery and I can just do whatever I want. Or suppose I get diagnosed with some deadly disease and I only have 6 months to live. That absolves me from all responsibilities. What will I do? And actually the answer to both questions was the same. I want to go back and kneel at Samadhi. So that's what I did.
82?
September, I think, 82. And I spent a couple of weeks in Pondy, and then
what happened when you knelt at the Samadhi?
It was just home. No, that's home. And if there's really a battle, it's the battle for Samadhi. No. Everything else can go.
Even the chamber, the matrimony chamber?
That's maybe for other people.
Today at the Samadhi, you still feel the same intensity that we felt 40 years ago?
I rarely go, just as I rarely go to the chamber. Now I'm carrying it with me. I think the presence is stronger than ever. The action stronger than ever. It's remarkable this year.
In the family?
Everywhere. Everywhere.
Mother's presence, Sri Aurobindo's presence?
Sri Aurobindo's presence, I feel particularly. Sri Aurobindo's action.
Where is his action? Where do we see his action today? Forget about Auroville, where do we see his action in the world and in India?
You know, such a huge change has to come in the world. And actually, it's on the brink of a third world war. I think what Mother said, that what this new supramental force wants to do, it is to harmonize everything. So changes are necessary, but they should come with the minimum of destruction. And where there's a little opening, miracles happen all the time.
Give us some examples of what.
So look at this place. How has this come here? Starting 1995, we were barely readmitted into Auroville. How could this happen? And actually everybody in Auroville, when we started it, they said, oh, Shraddhavan again, starting a new religion. Still people think that.
Not much, I think.
So the first, immediately there was support from outside. Ashram came, they came for the foundation. Everybody who loved Nirodha, they came. Dr. Nadkarni started coming. Society people came. It became worse and worse and worse. The Aurovillians who started coming, they had to fight little battles here and there. I say, no, come on, you come once. It's not a religion. And then we put up the statue. Even Rakal was furious with me. Desu. Anyway.
No, it's important, When I came
but
to Shraddhavan,
the way it has happened, people say, oh, Shraddhavan, you've done a great
there
work.
was a conflict, I remember when I came to Caravan,
I haven't done anything.
There was one group led by Vincenzo, who had a more, down-to-earth approach, let's say, to the mother and Sri Aurobindo and Auroville. There was one group led by Anna Monnier, which used to put photos of the mother, in the van, so that van that took you the first time to Auroville. And then Vincenzo and his gang would come and rip off the photo. So that conflict, which is ridiculous, was there. But was it the same conflict that you went through? And the same conflict today when you say that you feel that it's a religion?
I don't care, no? I know what we have to do. That's the wonderful thing. I wanted to do the Divine's will, and I've been given the opportunity and some guidance and support for that. And that's my job. It's to, not that razor's edge, I couldn't keep that up. But somehow every day there's a thread. So that's my job. It's not to care whether they approve or they don't approve or they don't like it. Such a kerfuffle about the wall. Fortunately, we were away. I didn't have to face that at the time. But, the whole thing's been passed through the planning group. Everybody's known about it for months, years even. And after all, it will be green on both sides. Why does everybody have to have an opinion about it? It's not my business to worry about that. I just have to know, people are very generous, money comes, Mother gives blessings. This has to be utilized in the best possible way for her work. Is
there any way today that the society and all of it can come together again in some form?
Well, there's been a considerable softening in their position, and when Dr. Nadkarni had a...
Who Dr. Nadkarni?
Anyway, never mind. He was connected with society. He was doing a series of Savitri study circles, camps in the society. He used to come and hold the closing session here. He said, this is a ground where everybody can meet. It doesn't matter whether you're from ashram, from society, from any other center, from Auroville. This place is dedicated to Savitri. Savitri is Sri Aurobindo's masterwork. Here we can all meet. And because he was important in society, their position softened. There was a ban on society centres and even members giving any donations to Auroville.
There was an official ban.
There was an official ban. So somebody, not me, went and approached them and said, look, Savitri Bhavan. So they raised it for Savitri Bhavan. And I think for Matrimandir they never could enforce it anyway.
Did Vijay Pada come here?
Pradeep Narang came once.
And?
Well, it was okay. And of course, when we have exhibitions, people come as individuals, they come.
Why Savitri?
No, what I want to say about Dr. Nadkarni was he invited me. He was holding a seminar there about ideal of human unity. They had financed delegates to come from their centres around the country. I don't know, they had about 30 people there. So it was a 4 or 5 day thing. So he invited me. I gave a 2-hour presentation about Auroville. So that was nice, in the Society Beach office.
What is the work that you want to do with Savitri? How can Savitri be a force?
Well, Savitri is a force. So the main thing is to allow that atmosphere of Savitri to touch as many people as are interested or open or possible. So there are different ways to do that. Utta's paintings, this is Mother's creation for that purpose. The people who come and give talks. For me, particularly rewarding, it's the study circles where Aurovillians come. Now since last December I've been doing Life Divine. Okay, I sit up front and so on, but we study it together. And this is so rewarding. This is so rewarding for me personally, but I think that's good for Auroville too. And all our activities are open to the general public, anybody who's interested.
You're happy today?
Yes, I'm happy. I'm very happy. I was under a lot of strain up to September, and then I went away on holiday, and I felt that this has to be a turning point, that this break. My mother passed away in February. That I can't go back into that state of tension and strain and overburdening of responsibilities. I can't do it. And I haven't. So I have to keep it like that.
Thanks. It was a wonderful interview. Different.
Nice to exchange with you. Nice to have Rakal here.
Different, I mean.
We've known each other so long, but maybe we never had such an intimate exchange.
You have to broach those subjects that are